Okay, it's playoff time, week 14, first round, the divisional round. It's going to get or actually, no, this is considered the wild card round, but whatever. It's going to get very interesting. Um, I know I sent my congratulations already to everybody in the chat. Uh, David, Brian, Andre, Max, myself, and Johnny. Congratulations, you guys have made it this far. You are the final six. Best of luck, guys. And there's no turning back now. So, without further ado, I'm gonna go in depth as possible with these matchups. So it might be a little bit longer. Um, First matchup that I'm gonna break down are two teams coming in from the quote unquote best fucking division. Um, these teams have played each other twice. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the series was split. I think David was the first person to hand Andre his loss. I'm actually going to go ahead and check this just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure the series was split. Um, I think Andre went like 5-0 or something like that. David handed him the first loss of the season, and thus coming in the rivalry week with the 3 games in a row, yes, Andre did beat David. So this is going to be an interesting matchup for one. Little playoff history fact: uh, Andre's first playoff appearance was in the wild card round against David Sutton. That was the first and the only time that these two teams have met until this week coming up. If you guys remember, that was 3 years ago. Peyton's magical Peyton Manning team went up against Andre's team, and it came down to the San Diego connection that Andre had at the time with Philip Rivers and Keenan Allen. That was a really rookie year Keenan Allen too, where he started to heat up. But David's team eventually prevailed due to Peyton Manning just going off, and he had some other key pieces as well. So that was the only time that these two Mets have met in the playoffs. So David leads the series in that matchup at 1-0. Now, without further ado, let's get into the matchup right away. Um, well, first and foremost, I think that it's not set in stone right now, but the way I'm seeing it is Drew Brees taking on Colin Kaepernick, who the 49ers have stated on their team site and to the media that he is going to be the starting quarterback. Well, and David also has Matthew Stafford on the bench. I think both guys aren't bad options. The way I see it, the matchup against the Jets is very tempting. Is very tempting with Colin Kaepernick. The thing I worry about, I don't think, other than the Bears game, which was one game, Kaepernick's floor, in my personal opinion, is around 15 to 17 points. But he's had a great ceiling. I know a lot of people want to say that his floor is 20 points. I think that's, yeah, I can see why people would say that. But in this particular matchup, I actually think that his floor is not going to be as high because a lot of the times 49ers are trailing when he just demolishes. When he gets all those big numbers, like the Miami game, they were trailing. I don't know if they'll be trailing against the Jets, to be honest. And honestly, like the Jets are terrible. Take it from a Jets fan. I don't know honestly, but obviously in a really good matchup, the 21 points that is projected by him is certainly obtainable. But then he's got to take on Drew Brees, who had the worst game of his life that I can remember at least. He's going on the road against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So now this is 4 games in a row where their defense has come up with big turnovers and they're limiting opponents. Um, I as much as I would like, it was against the Bears. You're not going to buy that one. In Kansas City was an impressive win. At home against Seattle, impressive win, and then at San Diego. So the defense, let's be honest, man. I don't buy it, but you got to show some respect. And Is Drew Brees going to become Road Brees? Because that's going to be a bad, bad, bad situation for Andre if that does happen. However, Drew Brees is somebody I don't think anybody will ever consider of benching. However, I do think that if Colin Kaepernick was to hit, it might be a case where David might have an edge on the quarterback matchup. So, but with that being said, though, the fact that it's the Jets, and I don't necessarily know if Kaepernick is going to have to do a lot as far as fantasy production is concerned, I'm actually going to say this is a draw. I think I'll give you my worst case scenario things with the quarterbacks. I think worst case scenario for Colin Kaepernick is 2 total touchdowns and a turnover, whether that be a pick or a fumble, something like that. And he'll probably get total yards because I'm going to add in rushing. It'll probably be around like 315. When I look at the thing for Drew Brees, I think worst case scenario is one of those games where it's only like 2 touchdowns. I just feel like his floor is just so safe because he has such a great opportunity to put up monstrous 30 plus point games. Obviously, those games happen at home, but we'll have to see if Tampa's defense is truly for real. So that's just my take on the quarterbacks. When I look at the wide receiver matchups, I think this is going to be very, very interesting as well. So you have Andre with Julio Jones and Brandon Cooks. David's going to roll in his 2 slots with Jordan Matthews and Michael Crabtree. So right off the bat in this playoff matchup, there's no room for error. We obviously know that. I'll start on the opposite end this time. I'll start on Andre's team. Julio Jones is officially dealing with, and now a lot of people think this is a serious injury. So I don't know how that's going to affect Julio Jones. But obviously, you're not going to fucking bench the guy. However, if Jones was to miss this game, this is a big, big blow for Andre. He cannot have Julio Jones miss this game, man. I mean, if your best player decides he's not going to play during fantasy playoffs, oh, I'd be livid, man. I really would. Other news: the Rams are expecting to use Tremaine Johnson to shadow. Tremaine Johnson is actually a very underrated cornerback. However, it's Julio Jones. I don't think Tremaine Johnson physically gets the best out of him. I just think that there's going to be other weapons for Matt Ryan that he's going to have to look towards. But I'm never going to predict a dud game for Julio Jones. It does happen, don't get me wrong. But as long as the guy's out there, I think he's going to produce serviceable numbers. I think with an injury like that, though, it's hard for me to predict an explosion. I think Jones finishes more as a wide receiver 2 than a wide receiver 1, meaning he'll probably get something around 13, 15 points tops. That's just my gut feeling. Brandon Cooks, well, so he cries pulling the diva card, and I mean, I honestly think because of that, that's why Drew Brees had such a shitty game last week. A lot of people were talking about how Brees had missed Michael Thomas a lot of times because he was forcing it to Brandon Cooks in triple coverage. He wanted to get the guy happy, and now he's on the trading block. Bottom line is this: I'm pretty sure Andre doesn't care that much what Cooks does. He just needs Drew Brees to be Drew Brees because if this forcing the ball to Brandon Cooks continues, Brees might get a lot of picks, and he might not get that many touchdowns. Cooks' box score for Andre might look pretty good, but how good is Drew Brees is going to be? Like, if Cooks is to get force-fed and get 17 points, and Brees might only get like 15 or 18 points. So, they lost that game. So a right coach is going to be like, yo, go back to what we're doing. You're just going to have to live with if you're open or not open. Stop being all right, I'm not going to call him a bitch, but you can't cry. Stop pulling the wide receiver diva card. Because this is playoff times, Brandon Cooks. Well, obviously he doesn't care right now, but I think if you have Brandon Cooks, you need to certainly do something to get him involved a little bit more creatively than what you tried to do last week, because obviously it wasn't working. Back onto David's side, Jordan Matthews is questionable. I'd expect him to play. Reports were that if it wasn't, he was as a game time decision, meaning that he was close to playing, and it shouldn't be anything serious to keep him out. Other thing is this: we don't know if Norman's going to be on him. Last week, Norman went on Fitzgerald 21 times when he was in the slot, or 14 or something 14 times, excuse me. So it's not officially exclusive, But if you're going against the Philadelphia Eagles, man, and he's out there, that's the only guy you have to take out and force Wentz to go somewhere else with the ball. So if Josh Norman was to be on Jordan Matthews, this would also be close to a dud game. The fact that he might be on him in a few plays leads me to believe that Jordan Matthews might finish as a low end two, meaning he might get 10 to 11 points. Michael Crabtree. This is another guy who, talent wise, you traded for. You love the solid production that he gets. I think he's one of the safest floor wide receiver twos, and occasionally can put up wide receiver one numbers. And a matchup against Kansas City, when he was on that tear in the beginning of the season and he finished inside the top five for wide receivers, they matched up. They said, Peters, go on Michael Crabtree. Peters shut him down. He didn't do anything, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think Cooper had the better day. Well, you know what? I don't know how Kansas City's going to play this. I would predict that Crabtree would draw Peters. Peters doesn't like to go to one side of the field, and if I'm Oakland, you're trying to score the big play bomb, and you're going to test Phillip Gaines. I I don't know if I can really predict Crabtree to have that good of a game, especially on the road. It's going to be tough. I think if Crabtree is to have a good game for you, I believe that he can get you 15 to 16 points. But if Crabtree is going to be limited by Peters, you might be looking at something like a 7 point performance, just because you got to respect Marcus Peters. I, I for one think he's a little overrated. It's just my thing because he likes to gamble. He's either pick or he'll give up a touchdown or give up a big play. He's known for his picks, but he's very, very instinctive, and that's what you like as a corner. Um, it's going to be interesting. To be quite honest, out of the receiver matchups, the guy that I'm most confident in isn't even saying much. It's Brandon Cooks, just because I think the matchup against Tampa Bay is not a daunting one, and I believe Cooks had a good game against them last season. But then again, there was no Michael Thomas. Going into the running back matchups, it looks like we're going to Marco Murray and Bilal Powell on the Andre side of the ball, taking on Doug Martin and LaShawn McCoy. Well, I think a clear-cut matchup-based winner and just a two-headed monster with David would likely give me the edge to pick in this one. So Doug Martin. So this is a guy you traded with Paul. Stashed him in the IR spot. He's come back. I wouldn't say he's looked like the RB1 Doug Martin of last season, but when you have a guy like LaShawn McCoy who's a clear-cut RB1, I think you're going to take the RB2 production that you're getting out of Doug Martin. Only question I have with Doug Martin is it something where I look at him and I'm like, this guy is very, very, very touchdown dependent. However, it's a matchup against New Orleans, which would lead me to believe that a touchdown is to be scored in this one. They have Martin projected at 11 points. I don't necessarily think there's two touchdown potential. And also, Rodgers has a pass catching rule, so something to monitor just a little bit, which limits his upside greatly. But if a touchdown does score, I think he gets in the low teens. I'll say like 14-ish. This was the concern of Doug Martin because people thought Sims would come out of nowhere, but Martin got hurt and Sims got hurt, and because Rodgers is actually a thing again. McCoy. Bottom line, they're at home. This guy is just matchup proof. It doesn't matter who's on the field. You can take it the distance from anywhere. So you like your chances with LaShawn McCoy. Going on to Tennessee and DeMarco Murray. I actually believe that Tennessee is going to keep this game very close. They might even win this game. I think with having a week to prepare, having a week to prepare for Denver's defense, it leads me to believe that there's going to be a lot of running plays and a lot of creativity. The volume for Murray should still be there to warrant him running back one potential. The only way I see Murray not getting RB1 potential, other than the fact of an injury, is if for some reason, how after the bye, they decide Derrick Henry is our goal line back, which I don't think is going to happen. The guy should be totally fine. Bilal Powell. With Bryce Petty, I got to be honest. You know what? I mean, I had Powell. I actually dropped him his first game with Bryce Petty just because there was no room for me to have Powell. Forte wasn't going down. If the Jets are trailing to the San Francisco 49ers, which is a very big possibility, there could be a lot of garbage dump offs because Petty sucks. I think Petty can only hit Robbie Anderson, and then he might check down to Powell if they're behind by a lot. But I'm not even going to be very big on it. They're projecting him at 10, which I think is very, very generous to predict Bilal Powell at double digit points. I know it's the San Francisco 49ers. I completely understand that. But the guy I think I would feel more confident in a double digit matchup would be Forte. I don't know how Powell is going to be utilized greatly, but can you live with low end two numbers? Because it looks like 10 points that's his upside, I guess. Yeah. So, but needless to say, I like David's running back matchups. So as we go a little further down, we got a tight end matchup that I actually am very intrigued by. Greg Olson looks like he could have a monstrous day maybe against San Diego. He's been very, very, very quiet of recent weeks. And Ladarius Green, this is finally the number two option that Pitt was looking for. I know his snap total isn't 100%, but on the passing downs and when they split out wide, he is the guy that they utilize as a guy to beat the bracket coverage that's focusing on Antonio Brown. You saw that last week, especially in man-to-man coverage when he got that touchdown. Ben is going to have to look to his best playmakers, and I do believe that by default, well, not including Le'Veon Bell, but if we include Le'Veon Bell, he's the third most talented player on this team. I think Coates is actually a decent talent, but with his fingers hurting, like they don't trust him to catch passes. Um, but Ladarius Green, he honestly might be a Flory tight end. I feel like with upside, he just has that. This is why I drafted him all those years in San Diego. You saw the freakish ability of this guy because he's so tall. I like Green, to be quite honest with you. I'll even predict. Give me 5 catches, 70 yards, and a touch. I I think this is the difference maker for this matchup. On Davis' side of the ball is certainly Ladarius Green. Okay, flex spots. So my difference maker in this game for David was Ladarius Green. Well, the difference maker in Andre's team, if he rolls him out, is Jeremy Maclin. Um, who knows, man? I think you know you really can't realistically think of a better option than what you have than Jeremy Maclin. Um, doesn't even look like he's listed on the injury report, which means that he's expected to play. It's a short week against on Thursday. Last year, Macklin's games that were good, I believe he had some serviceable games against the Oakland Raiders. Maybe he comes back, maybe he scores. We'll have to see. That's obviously you hope for that. They're projecting him at 10 points, which leaves me to believe that he's a low end wide receiver 2, probably a wide receiver 3, just because he's been terrible this whole season. And I had him last year, and I know Andre, I gave him to you last year. I did not expect this bad of a season. I wasn't big on it. Did not expect this bad of a season though. But if this guy's had 4 weeks of rest, this could be very sneaky. I think this is a difference maker for if Andre wins this one. Next, I have Adam Thielen. Uh, I don't know how I feel about him, to be honest. It's against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which are a very underrated pass defense. Um, the thing you do like about Thielen's opportunity is because the coverage, basing on Stephon Diggs. But I don't think this is a guy who offers much upside. So I think you're looking at a floor of like 8 to 10, personally. Hopkins has to step up. Can he step up? He scored late last week. I don't know, man. I'm not I'm not huge on DeAndre Hopkins by all means. And then you have Dante Moncrief. Well, the one thing you could say about Hopkins, this matchup isn't a bad one. I think it's very serviceable. But the quarterback, what are we gonna do with the quarterback? I don't know. It's just such a shame. He's still top 10 in targets, but quarterback play, man, can kill you sometimes. Just ask DeAndre Hopkins. Um, I highly doubt he finishes with wide receiver 1 numbers. I think his upside is wide receiver 2. For example, if Hopkins does score, he might just have 2 catches after that. I'll say like it'll be like a 3 catch 50-yard performance and a touchdown. But that also screams out a lot like Dante Moncrief. Ever since this guy's been back, 5 straight games with a touchdown. That's all he does. He's not getting the yardage, but he's getting the touchdowns, and it's hard to sit a guy who consistently gets touchdowns. Um, Next, we're going to go to the defenses. I don't think there's much to talk. Oh, wait, no, I got it. The kicker matchup is actually very interesting. I think we need to talk about this. Bailey has been a beast, but I think Hauschka can also cancel him out as well. Indy's defense against Brock, you're hoping for turnovers. I don't know, but it's Indy's. It's Indy's D though. That's what makes me a little bit nervous on that one. Well, time for me to pick a winner in this one, guys. Here it goes. So the way I see things, and the way I'm looking at it right now, um, for an Andre victory to happen, I've said this all every time Andre's in a matchup. For an Andre victory to happen, the things in the flex, they really need to step up, because he has the big four with Breeze, Jones, Cooks, and Murray. Those guys have potential to put up explosive numbers. So the flexes also have to do their part. And then when I look at David's side of the ball, the right quarterback has to be chosen in this matchup. So that's step one. I'm not big on Matthews, not big on Crab, not big on Hopkins, not big on Moncrief. Just kidding. Moncrief and Hopkins do have some nice potential. I actually think that this comes down to the flexes in this one. Um, I do think that the running back combined total is much better with Davids than Andres, despite Murray probably having a good game. But the way I see it, if you kind of switch Hopkins and Moncrief up at the top, and then switch Matthews and Crabtree with Thielen and Macklin, I think it's very even if you look at it like that. Um, and we usually go by matchups. So in the second half of the season, Andre's team has gone 3 wins, 4 losses. We know what type of team this has become with Andre now. It's a boom or bust team because it's so explosive. So and if it hits, it's most likely a win for this guy because they're going to put up very good numbers unless the other team puts up a godly performance. And next, and then David fought his way into the playoffs. I think after losing to Andre when he was 6-5, I believe was their record against Brian. I really left David for dead against Brian, especially after Thanksgiving when Crowder and Reed went off. But this team has shown a lot of fight, and they did win when Johnny's team laid an egg. I don't know. Time for me to pick though. So the difference maker for David's team is Ladarius Green, and while I do think he can be having another serviceable day, I just think that the guys I'm not confident, 100% I'm not confident in, or it's probably Jordan Matthews and Crabtree. I think we have to be cautious with. I like Martin, I like McCoy, and I like Moncrief just to score. I think Martin and McCoy put up number one potential numbers. I think Moncrief gets his 10 to 12. And I think Ladarius Green and Hopkins have to carry this team. When I look at the Andre side of the ball, I think Breeze is fine. If Jones is out there, I still think he'll put up serviceable numbers. I still think Cooks is okay in a matchup against Tampa. Bilal Powell, Greg Olson, and I'm actually confident in Jeremy Maclin bouncing back, which is not good news for you. I think the two things that aren't going to work out for Andre, I believe, are Thielen and Bilal Powell. I mean, that's kind of obvious, though. This is a tough one. This is a real, real tough one. So I think both of these managers are going to put up a really good fight. I think they've had to deal with a lot this whole season. Um, but when it comes down to it, when it really comes down to it, guys, the guy I'm going to have to pick to be my winner in this one is a guy who had a lot of wins in the beginning of the season. He finished off with 8. I'm gonna have to go Andre. I do think this is going to be a very, 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 very close matchup in a battle of the best division. Um, while I do think there's very good opportunity for David's side of the ball, I think there's a little bit more explosion with the Andre team. Um, I actually think Macklin has a bounce back game. You're going to hear people talking about it on the radio, Twitter. Um, and if Jones is out there 100%, I like Dre. Obviously, if Jones doesn't play, or if they're saying some report that like he's going to be limited, my opinion might drastically change on this game. But I gotta go. The next matchup we are going to break down. Oh, this is well, wow. This is a rivalry that's been going on since the age of time. This is the way I look at this is like the big brother little brother rivalry. It's gone way back. Both of these teams love to outdo one another, and they love rubbing it in each other's faces when the one of them wins. I'm talking about the highly anticipated rivalry matchup of Max and Brian. There's a lot of history with this matchup. A lot of history with this matchup. This is definitely a matchup I'm certainly looking forward to, not because I play them, whoever wins out of this matchup next week, but this. It's funny that it came down to these two in the first round. A little bit of a history, playoff history for this matchup. Last time these two met into the playoffs was 3 seasons ago in the semifinal round. Brian against Max. Brian's team was off to a good start and looked like he was off to a Super Bowl until Jamal Charles dropped 50 on Oakland. A 50-point performance was the biggest difference maker, in my personal opinion. I know last year was Arizona's defense, but one of the biggest difference makers in a playoff win that I have ever seen. A 50-point performance. If there was ever a time you needed a 50-point performance, that was the time to need it. I'll never forget, playing Max after that match, but Brian was very, very salty, and Max had won that matchup. So now we're going to talk about this upcoming matchup. Different teams, different situations. Let's get into it. And guys, as you're both listening to this right now, you know it's 100% of what I say. Second thing that I'm going to tell both of you about right now is that there is no bias into this at all. Out of all the matchups I've done, personally, out of all the matchups I've done this season, and when I'm calling and predicting games, the two people that I've picked against constantly have been Max and Brian. Well, what do you know? Both of them play each other. Again, uh, the one thing is that, in the middle of the season, I was not huge on Brian's team. I thought there were a few wins that I was just like, no way. I wasn't buying into it. But then I was officially sold. Even though when he lost to Johnny 3 weeks ago, I was officially sold. I said, you know what? This kid has battled. He's had a few injuries. Um, I I've learned to respect that team. And Minx, I just there's certain points where I just don't like his situations. So that's why I was constantly picking against him. And the funny thing is, guys, every time I picked against one of you, you wound up winning the game. And the times that I do pick, you don't win. So let's see what happens. Kicking things off with a veteran, 10-year veterans quarterback matchup. Look who's back on my team, Philip Rivers. But he's not better than Carson Brain. Rivers is gonna kick Palmer's ass, Max. Alright, so Philip Rivers versus Carson Palmer. Oh, God. The way I see this, I think there are two teams personally, and in my opinion, I know anything can happen. It's an any given Sunday, type of scenario. But the two teams that I think are going to be, actually, you can kind of throw in three teams. There's three teams I think in this playoff bracket that are going to struggle between picking quarterbacks, and Max is certainly one of them. The others being David and Johnny. Um, and this quarterback conundrum has really I've stressed out Max, I think, beyond belief this season. If you recall, Max had, he was like the first one, I think, to have like 7 wins at like the 1 seed at one point because Andre started to lose and he just couldn't wrap it up. And a lot of it has to do with quarterback play and somebody else who I'm pretty sure you've known in your starting lineup for quite some time. Anyway, off topic. Palmer and Rivers. I think clear cut. I like Rivers 10 times better than Palmer. Reason being, we always knock on Breeze, we always knock on Ben Roethlisberger about the home road splits. One guy is terrible on the road, but he's great at home. Palmer is now an exception to that as well. He's not good on the road. Like he's flat out like poop. But here's the way I see this, though. I think Rivers is a much safer floor option. I can't even say that Palmer has upside for 30 plus point games. I don't even. I'm not going to go and check, but I'm pretty sure he didn't have a 30 plus point game all season. He might have had a high 20s game, but the dude's just not the same. The receivers are not healthy. They're blitzing him constantly. I feel much safer in Philip Rivers than Carson Palmer. I think Rivers' stat line will be 315 yards, a touchdown. And to be quite honest with you, the only thing I worry about Rivers, for some reason, he's throwing picks this year. I know last year he was very careful with the ball, but there might be a turnover or two for Philip Rivers. I think he does hit 300. I think he does get multiple touchdowns. And when I look at Palmer, well, I think his upside is 2 touchdowns in this game. There's no way I see a 3 touchdown game. His floor, well, I think it's a touchdown and a pick. Um, but I give the advantage to Philip Rivers. I'll say Rivers drops 23 points, and I'll say that Palmer gets 17. So advantage Brian. All right, next we're gonna go to the wide receivers. Um, I'm gonna start with two guys that Max. No, one of them Max drafted. The other guy he traded for to create this kind of unique combo going as a top wide receiver one's explosive combo, and that's Jordy and Beckham. Um, I think there might have been one game all season that Max had both of these guys completely be in sync and go off for wide receiver one numbers. And what I mean by going off, I don't mean 15 and 15. What I mean is Nelson hitting 22 and Beckham hitting like 26. That's what I mean by going off. When I look at the production over the season for both of these guys for Max, the answer is yes. Max will be okay if Nelson was to get 17 and Beckham got 16. He'll take that. However, you know damn well what he's hoping for is something like 20 plus from each. And it's possible. Certainly is possible, but it's never happened on the same week. So I do think that scenario still applies this week. Nelson's got a tough matchup, and Beckham kind of has a tough matchup. Dallas and Seattle, not the best for both of these guys to go against. For some reason, Odell Beckham is just invisible against the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know what it is. It just happens. And then when I look at Jordy Nelson, I wouldn't worry about him too much. To be quite honest, they're at home. They're not in Seattle, and I do think that Sherman, I think, does not follow him around. Um, I do expect like a very similar performance. I'll say Nelson 17 and Beckham like 12. That would be my honest prediction. Now you're going to guys on Brian's side of the ball, Jamison Crowder, Emmanuel Sanders. These are guys that were taken as flexes, but for some reason have wide receiver two appeal. Crowder has been insanely consistent. He just has. I think to be honest, of recent weeks, Crowder, I think Tyrell Williams, Jamison Crowder, and Dante Moncrief have been. Well, I won't put Williams in there because Tyrell Williams to me I think is a consistent wide receiver one, but the most consistent wide receiver twos for just getting their floor every single time because they don't have upside, but they're gonna get floor. Crowder and Moncrief, they've just seemingly find ways to get double digit points. There's no way Crowder is being benched in this game for B's team. That's right. Next, we have Emmanuel Sanders um, on the road at Tennessee. Tennessee looks like a fantastic matchup, but what's the deal with the quarterback play? Something just to be concerned about a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if something like a dud game were to happen for Sanders, but then again, I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped 15, um, due to the fact that it's the Tennessee Titans. When I look at this, obviously I'm going to give Max the advantage at the wide receiver spots, but do not be alarmed. Do not be alarmed because these other two can close the gap a little bit in that. Okay, difference maker for Brian. We're gonna start off. The obvious difference maker is Thomas Rawls. Is he gonna be? He might not be what he was last season. He showed it last week. And even better news for Thomas Rawls, all the Packers linebackers except for Julius Peppers, or maybe he's even on the injury too. They're all on the injury report. All of them got dinged up last week. Nick Perry, if he's out, that's the biggest one. He's their biggest run stuffer. Whereas Clay Matthews is still good, but he's used for pass rushing. And it's Jake Ryan, Nick Perry, Clay Matthews, and Blake Martinez. All four of them are listed on the injury report. Usually, when there's four, cut it in half. You got to predict at least that 50% of them are going to be out. Clay Matthews is always hurt. This could be trouble for Green Bay. If this guy can get, all you have to do against Green Bay's run defense, guys, get through the first level, that interior right there. If you get past big old Mike Daniels, you're going to be good. The only issue I have, though, is the Seattle offensive line. But regardless, when Green Bay doesn't have their linebackers to clean up space, Rawls could have another field day, and that could spell trouble for Max. Rashad Jennings. This is a guy you just. It's hard for the situation for Brian to bench him because I completely understand why. He's not buying into Terrence West's 2 touchdown performance last week because he's been so cold before then. And Jennings, even in like the weirdest matchups, he seems to like produce. Oddly enough, the best ones like Cleveland, he didn't do anything, but it's hard to bench a guy when you're seeing consistent production week in and week out for him. Um, so I'll say like his floor is like a running back 3, like 7 points, but he's certainly capable of getting 12 or so. This okay, the difference maker for this team. There's actually a lot, but because I know that he's talked about it forever. Dion Lewis is the difference maker for Max. Interesting to see Jay Ajayi being benched in this matchup. I think that's a very interesting call by Max. Um, thing with Dion Lewis, it's prime time. One of the fantasy experts on Yahoo is saying because of prime time, this and that, he's gonna have a field day. Dion Lewis is going to be back. It's a bold statement. That is a bold statement. My philosophy on Dion Lewis is that they're saving his true potential for the playoffs. It's just a hunch, just a guess. However, against the Baltimore Ravens, this does look like a matchup where they're going to utilize him because they haven't used him often on tape. Uh-oh. Gurley. Todd Gurley gets the nod in a plus matchup. Well, is it going to be yes, Todd Gurley, or more crying? Gurley. The best news about this game is that the Rams are at home. That's the best news, and Atlanta's run D is flat out booty. They give up a lot of touchdowns. Off the top of my head, I know Melvin Gordon scored 3 touchdowns. Spencer Ware had 2 touchdowns. Ryan Matthews, I believe, had 2 touchdowns as well. They are very, very, very bad against the running back position. Gurley could be primed for a big game, but we've been saying this all season. He is officially, in my book, no longer running back 1 potential. I think he only gave you one 20-point performance that was back in week 3 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The 11 points, I think, is not generous and not under. I think it's fair to see that 11. It's very hard to get on Todd Gurley at this point, guys. It really is. But when I have to pick a clear-cut winner for running backs, wow. I like Rawls. I'm a little so-so on Jennings. Dion Lewis, I'm a little so-so on. And then Gurley, I'm a little so-so on. Um, My personal opinion, I wouldn't be surprised if Max's running backs outproduce. I'm just going to go with Brian just because I think that Rawls getting double digits, and if Jennings was to hit single digit points, I still think it'll be enough to cover Todd Gurley and Deion Lewis. Okay, tight end news. We don't have a Jordan Reed sighting. He's in individual drills. We don't know. People are pessimistic about his Week 14 status. But that is another difference maker long term if Brian was to win this one. It would be Jordan Reed. Delaney Walker against the Denver Broncos. I got to be honest with you. I want to say I like it. I really want to say I like it. Thing that kind of concerns me a little bit is that Chris Harris has gone up against tight ends. Yes, tight ends are more physical than Chris Harris, but his presence is going to limit the opportunities. He did it against Gronk. I don't. Somebody has to refresh me because I didn't watch 2 weeks ago Kansas City and Denver. But Kelsey did have a big game, so that is kind of optimistic. I highly doubt Harris was on him, and if he was, then I guess Travis Kelsey is actually back to being Travis Kelsey. It's obvious, guys. If Tennessee is to have success throwing the ball, it's going to be that guy, Delaney Walker. I don't expect Rashard Matthews to continue a consistent, ridiculous approach. Vance McDonald is an interesting pickup with Cappy bitch back, and the Jets have always struggled against tight ends. Vance could be in a big spot. Oh, it's Theo and Malcolm Mitchell taking on Fitzgerald and Pryor. I think Riddick's ankle injury has limited his opportunities. I don't think Detroit wants to get him fully. The workload that he was getting in the beginning of the season was amazing, and we thought he was like a great RB2. He's calmed down since then, and I think it's due to the injury. We're seeing more running backs mix and match in, and the news is that Abdullah could come back. Just something I'm throwing out there. Malcolm Mitchell, excellent deep threat kind of a guy. Um, he also could be a difference maker. Not bad against the Ravens. Fitzgerald and Pryor. Pryor, I think we have to be worried about with Robert Griffin. We don't know what his production is going to be with Robert Griffin throwing him the football. Um, Positive thing in the preseason, he was throwing bombs to him and Pryor was catching him, but that's when Pryor wasn't developed as a wide receiver. The tape is all over the field. Can Robert Griffin hit him in these intermediate routes rather than relying on a deep bomb? That's the biggest question mark. Larry Fitzgerald, he has not scored in 7 straight games. However, he has been very productive with the PPR catches. He's like a, what do you call it? I would say like a high end too. Just because like if there were touchdowns in there, he'd probably be in the wide receiver one conversation, like on a lower end of spectrum. And this looks like a matchup that he can exploit very well. Washington and New England. New England at home against Joe Flacco on the road. I understand that logic. Washington. Uh, oh yeah, Washington's a nice play. Time for me to finally pick a winner. If Brian is to win this game, Sanders I believe would have to have a good game. I expect Rawls to have a good game. I think Sanders is the difference maker because you have to limit the Jordy Nelson and Odell Beckham performances. And I also think the sleeper, Malcolm Mitchell, 3 straight games with double digit points. Could he make it four? Why not? They don't have Gronk anymore, so somebody's got to step up, and he's their biggest presence at wide receiver. I'm even gonna be bullish on that one. I think if Brian is to win this game, Malcolm Mitchell has a big day. Emmanuel Sanders has a big day, and of course, I think Rawls has a big day. Also, quick note here: last 4 weeks, I think it's 3 out of the 4 weeks or 4 out of the 5 weeks, Brian has had a player get him have a 2 touchdown performance. That's been the biggest key because now it's not something you want to consistently rely on, but that's if you go by the consistency, something you have to look at. The way I've always broke down Brian's team, not counting the tight ends, out of the 4 wide receiver or the 2 wide receiver spots and the flex, if one of those guys is to get like 20-point performance because he's had that of recent weeks, and with Jordan Reed in the tight end spot, I think everything else hits their low floor. That's the way his team is built. I think it's like an underrated safe team, and we don't think that it's a safe team because I think people just look at the players that he has and it's like, you've got to be kidding me. And I understand why people would think that, but logically, I'm just going to put this on the board. I'll say Rawls was to get 22 points. Then you're looking at 22 from Rivers, 11 from Crowder, 12 from Sanders, 8 from Jennings. Walker would get like 14. Riddick. You see what I'm saying? When you add up all those low double digits, it sometimes gets the job done, especially if you get somebody else other than your quarterback getting 20. And it's been happening. I can't knock him for it. And you might look at, and if that does happen, you might look at another 130 plus performance from Brian, like the 130 to 140 range. The way Max has to win, out of the four wide receivers that he's starting, he's going to need big explosions from at least two of them. Because if I think about it, right, say Nelson was to get 22 like he did last week, and we'll use last week as a prime example. Beckham got him 12, but the other two flexes, I know you didn't have Pryor in, but let's just say Pryor did whatever so and so did last week.